There have been over 100 of these Saturday groups, and almost all the time, we talk about working with intense emotion, deepening devotion, deepening compassion, what to do with fear and anger, how to deepen our tantric understanding of reality, working with non-duality. And what I've been really looking at lately is sort of the opposite of that, in the sense that so many people come to me and say, I love all these teachings, but I really have a hard time bringing them into practice when something is out of balance in my life. Certainly, what's going on now politically in our country has overwhelmed a lot of people. On the other hand, people come to me who have serious illnesses, who are grieving. And even though they know the teachings about mindfulness and compassion and devotion and tantra, that it's difficult to bring them into a moment-to-moment practice when things are difficult. And beyond that, it's difficult to feel the depth of devotion that one occasionally feels when you're in front of your altar or you're out at the ocean or something like that. And the more I thought about this, but what I've really come to honor and cherish is bringing practice into the neutral moments in life. In Buddhism, there are what are called the four foundations of mindfulness. Buddha said there are basically four categories of things that you could be mindful of. That's it. There's only four things. One is the body. That's fairly obvious. You can pay attention to your sensations. Another one is the mind. And interestingly enough, in both Chinese and in Sanskrit, the word for heart and the word for mind is the same word. I don't mean that it's the same in Chinese as it is in Sanskrit, but in Sanskrit, there's one word for heart and mind, chit. And in Chinese, it's sin, Hsin. So that the heart and mind are really one thing, which is a whole other conversation about a way of investigating that when we're lost in an emotion, there's probably a thought underneath there, a thought pattern that's causing the emotion. And then from the other direction, when we're caught in repetitive thought patterns, there's usually an emotion that we're not paying attention to. But what I'm getting at here is, okay, four foundations of mindfulness. First one is the body. Second one is the mind, or we could call it the heart mind. But the third one, I'm doing them slightly out of order. This is usually called the second one, is feelings. Not emotions, but feelings. And what's being said is associated with every experience you or I have is a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feeling. And one can just pay attention to those feelings instead of to the content. The fourth one, and we're going to go back and focus on feelings, but let me just complete the slight mini Buddhist lecture here and say that the fourth one is the mindfulness of the dharma, which is a kind of esoteric and subtle one that's hard to do unless you're in a retreat setting or you're really deeply mindful. You can be aware of, for instance, impermanence, not what's changing, but change itself. You can be aware of suffering, not how and why you're suffering, but suffering itself. You can be aware of anatta, no self. Okay, anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, suffering, no self. They're the three characteristics of existence in Buddhism. You can pay attention to that. But let's go back to the feelings. We've spent a lot of time in this group talking about working with negative feelings or difficult, unpleasant feelings. Negative is really a very inappropriate word, but that's often the way people look at unpleasant feelings. We live in a society that has deeply conditioned us that when we're having unpleasant feelings, we should change them. Anger, bad. Sadness, bad. Right? And happiness, good. We live in a country that's what is it? The Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's like right there. This is what our country is about. Being happy. Doesn't work too well, does it? But anyway, we spend a lot of time working with the unpleasant and cultivating the pleasant, cultivating devotion, cultivating compassion, cultivating equanimity, cultivating a tantric understanding of reality. But what I have found when I really honestly look at my life is about 95% of the time, I'm having neutral feelings. Yesterday, I had to drive from my home to the Berkeley Hills. It was a beautiful day. It was a sunny day, going to a home of a dear friend. And it's a long drive. It's almost an hour long. I could have turned on the radio and listened to the news. I could have played music. But instead, I just sat there in my car, not doing anything, just watching what was going on. And my sense of it is that until we learn to be present in neutral states, there's so many of them during the day. You're walking from your house to your car. You're sitting there chewing your breakfast. You're getting up out of bed in the morning. Until we learn to be present, and we're going to go through basic practices today to work with neutral states, until we can learn to do that, then our ability to work skillfully with difficult, unpleasant mind-body states or pleasant ones is going to be very limited. So that if you go around practicing just being present, then something difficult comes, you learn to do that. You have learned to do that. And in fact, very often in Buddhism, when you're cultivating a quality, you start with something that's easy and then something neutral and then something positive. And for many of us, we don't pay attention to the neutral, right? When we're not being confronted with something or we're not trying to fix something, we just say, okay, this is just life. And I notice how difficult it is to be really present in all these kind of transitional or intermediate stages. Like I'm getting out of bed in the morning, I'm moving from my bed to the toilet, or I'm putting my clothes on, right? Or I'm getting into my car. And these are almost always, for most people, times of being almost completely asleep, in my humble opinion. And I have relationships with several people in this room and who tell me about how upset they get about this and how upset they get about that, and how hard it is to integrate practice into daily life. So how do we get back to being present when we're lost in the mind during these neutral states? Almost always when we're just floating from one thing to the other, the mind is having this internal monologue that we're not paying much attention to, but it's keeping us from really being present. Here is a short quote from Milarepa, a really remarkable Tibetan Buddhist teacher of non-duality. In the beginning of a life of practice, nothing came. In the middle of practice, nothing stayed. At the end of a life of practice, nothing left. Okay. So I'd like to look at that. In the middle of practice, nothing stayed. That's where most of us are, right? We can conjure up, we can create positive mind states if we have the time to do it. Probably everybody in this room can sit down and meditate and think about God or watch your breath or move your body in certain prescribed ways or breathe in certain kinds of ways where you're able to create that. But in the middle of practice, nothing stayed. So it's like having good experiences, it prompted, but they're not yet innate. One of the first questions I started asking is, what is my tell? I don't know if you know what a tell is, but if you're a poker player, when you're looking at the people in the table as they're making their bets, the tell is when are they lying? Are they telling the truth? Or for me, my tell is what is going on in my body when I'm really not present? For me, when I'm really not there, and talking to you right now is kind of a neutral moment. It used to be a really positive moment. I'd get all excited, but now it happens so often. It's just like talking to a good friend. If I'm really present, my voice gets a little bit slower. It gets a little bit deeper. I get a little less excited. And when I get lost, my voice gets a little higher. My shoulders come up slightly. And you probably, if you really are honest, there are ways that your body is telling you, I'm not present right now. So we have talked again and again about a healing paradigm that I have put together. We're not going to go into any detail today, but central to the healing paradigm is there are 3 channels of healing. There's the body channel, there's the heart-mind channel, and there's the channel of living spirit. And my suggestion for all of us today is that by looking at how our body, our relationship with the body, our relationship with the heart-mind, our relationship with living spirit is getting broken or disconnected in all of these neutral moments, that it's a very important and crucial way, really, to begin to deepen practice by bringing practice into all these neutral moments. One of my teachers, Mundanity, who was Sharon Salzberg's teacher, Joseph Goldstein's teacher, he said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And I wasn't sure it was him that said that. So I looked it up online, and it turns out it was Thomas Jefferson, which I think both of them said it, actually. But the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Let's unpack that for a second. Eternal vigilance, at first blush, doesn't sound like a lot of fun. It sounds like really hard work, right? Eternal vigilance. It sounds like a task. It sounds like I've got to work hard. But really, it's quite the opposite. Being vigilant, finding a way to be in your body, be in your heart mind, be in relationship with living spirit consciously, is being vigilant, and it really takes less energy than being lost because we're in the flow of things. When I came home from my trip yesterday, I was excited to see that I had a package from Amazon. One of my desk lamps, here it is right here, you can see it, had broken, and I got a new desk lamp, and I got so excited that I lost being present in my body, and I was installing it. I had to plug it in under my puja table where the outlet is, and I bumped my head on the puja table. Boom. Right. And I just gone to this body worker and spent a lot of money to get my whole body fixed. And I just got lost in my mind to the point that I whacked my head on the corner of the puja table. Right. So that's just one example of how you think you're saving time by not being vigilant, by really jumping in there and look what happens. So what I notice is that if I'm not paying attention to neutral states, that almost always there is this internal monologue going on that I'm kind of paying attention to. And it's just a way of the ego saying, I'm here. Sometimes it has a worrying quality, sometimes a planning quality, sometimes just a very nebulous quality, but it's going on a lot of the time. And I've also been spending a lot of time outside, maybe not a lot, but spring is here, more time than in the winter, doing stuff. I don't have really a garden, but there's kind of wilderness, and I'm pulling out broom, and I'm doing things. And so I'm doing this kind of mindless work, and I just watch how sometimes I can be outside in the yard, in the wilderness area, whatever it is, and I'm just letting my body do things. My mind is quiet. I'm in my body. Sometimes I'm saying a mantra. Sometimes I'm just feeling this spaciousness. But sometimes this thinking is just going on. And one of the most direct practices I have found for not getting lost in that inner monologue during these so many neutral moments is learning the practice of watching the mind, not what you're thinking about, but just being aware of thinking itself. So that right now, as I'm talking, can you be aware of what's going on in your mind? Is it possible that you can hear these words without collecting them and judging what is Dale saying? Does this make sense? Do I need to write this down, or is he full of baloney, or what's going on here? Is it possible to just let the words come in and they land where they land, and the things that you need to know will be there, and the things that don't will just pass on through? But you're in this state of letting the mind be open, so that, and occasionally a thought will arise. I will say something that clicks into something in your mind. It inspires something. It resonates something, and you have a thought. There's no problem with a thought, but it's the thought about the thought about the thought. So one of the main practices is spending time in these neutral moments, just watching the mind, not judging it, not trying to suppress it. But when the mind gets quieter, it's almost like the feeling I have is almost like being a cat waiting at a mouse hole in the side of the wall, like in the cartoon, right? And that very often when we're not paying much attention to the mind, the volume of thoughts are pretty loud. They're like boom, boom, boom. That's the main thing that's going on. But when you really start paying attention to the mind, very often the volume gets really quiet. And these little thoughts will just come bubbling up from the subconscious, or a little mouse will like peep out from the mouse hole, and it'll see the cat and it'll just go back in again. There's this wonderful story Jack Kornfield tells where he was at a forest monastery in Thailand when he was a monk there. And he had been on retreat for some time alone in the forest doing walking meditation. He said his mind was so quiet, he hadn't had a thought for a day or two. I forget exactly how long. And as he was walking, out of nowhere came use Ajax, boom, boom, the foaming cleanser. And that just came drifting up out of his mind for no reason at all. It was just something stuck in the subconscious. So thoughts will come. But very often there's this ongoing thinking about the thinking, about the thinking, about the thinking, staying disconnected from a sense of spaciousness, a sense of connectedness. So heart mind, watching the mind part of the mind. There's also the heart part that one of the most robust practices for me is as I'm driving, as I'm walking to the bathroom, I can be saying my mantra that eventually the mantra begins to almost start saying itself. In the Bible, it says, pray without ceasing. And there's a wonderful book called The Way of the Pilgrim by a guy named French. And he puts together this kind of thin story that's just an excuse to bring in all these spiritual ideas. And then in the story, there's this Russian peasant who reads in the Bible, pray without ceasing. And he says, well, how can I do that? I have to eat, I have to sleep, I have to work. And he goes all around Russia because he's so bothered by this, asking these different teachers how he can pray without ceasing. And he gets all these unsatisfactory answers until finally at the end of the book, he finds this enlightened Orthodox Christian master who says that when you let the prayer deepen into your heart, the prayer will be saying itself. It's not even words anymore. The essence of the prayer of the heart is always there. It's there when you're sleeping. It's there when you're eating. It's there when you're not praying overtly, if you will. And you probably know the story that when Gandhi was assassinated, he was walking through a crowd to give a speech, and out of the crowd stepped a Hindu nationalist who didn't like the way he was trying to make nice with the Muslims, and shot him in the chest. And as he was falling over dying, he said, Ram, Ram, Ram. He was saying God's name as he was dying. His last thoughts and words were God's name. The reason he was able to do that is not because he was shot, but because he was always doing that. The dying, being shot unexpectedly, was another moment of Ram, Ram, Ram. Right? Going to the toilet is Ram, Ram, Ram. Eating breakfast is Ram, Ram, Ram. Getting shot in the chest is Ram, Ram, Ram. Okay, so I'm going to give a number of kind of basic practices that are very compatible, very appropriate for working with neutral situations. The first one, as I said, is watching what's going on in the mind. Second one is saying mantra. Another one is the heart part of the heart mind is we possibly remember that the qualities of the open heart are a mind that's connected, that's spacious, and that it's warm. You can go through the day of just asking, is my heart connected? Like right now. Is it connected? It could be connected to yourself. It could be connected to me or the other people in the room. It could be connected to God, the verticality, whatever you name that. It can be connected to the earth. And connection is not just a doing, it's also receiving, right? We love the earth. Can we also get that the earth loves us? That turns the relationship into a sacred relationship. Can we realize that connection can be with other people, regardless of what the content is? Maybe you're having a very neutral moment with your partner or your child or your barista, whoever it is, and you can be connected in that moment. A spacious heart, a heart that's spacious, is a heart that there's no clinging, there's no grasping, there's a feeling of spaciousness. Can you feel that right now? What does your heart feel like right now? Do you feel connected to yourself? Do you feel connected to me? Is there a sense of spaciousness, or is there kind of a grasping, a sense of too much excitement or too much boredom or too much intellectualism or whatever it might happen to be? And a warm heart, that's kind of obvious enough that I can't even talk about it. I don't know what to say about a warm heart. A warm heart as opposed to a not warm heart. I guess that's my deficiency, that I can't describe a warm heart. Maharaji would say things like, I am always with you. See God in everyone. Don't be afraid of anything. So this is now talking about spirit. As soon as we're feeling afraid, or as soon as we're forgetting that everybody's God, or at least the face of God, as soon as we forget that God is always with us and supporting us, we tend to get lost in the mind. I have found in my life that I use these different practices at different times. Sometimes it's mantra, sometimes it's watching my mind. For me, one of the main robust ways is being in the body, sensations. Just when you're feeling sensations, when you're mindful of sensations, you're not thinking. You're not doing the two things at the same time, or at least it's incredibly difficult to do both at the same time. Let's not exaggerate too much any more than absolutely necessary. Sensations. And a lot of times I'm just resting in sensation, just sensation as an expression of aliveness, of presence, sensations even being a gateway into presence. And even beyond that, we can use being grounded and being centered, which we've talked about a lot, embodied mindfulness. If you're really lost in your head, like you're really anxious about something, there's a difficult moment or a super exciting moment where you're really getting lost in it, then one can come back to being grounded and being centered. But here, once again, we're talking mostly about not being super excited. We're talking about these neutral moments. So when we die, we will die into wholeness. We will die into oneness. We will die into this experience of profound spaciousness, of profound presence. That presence is completely available even in the most mundane, neutral moment that you can find. Right? There are all these stories about near-death experiences, and there's a tunnel of light, and there are loved ones who are guiding us, and then you come to this incredible light where it's like your own true nature, and it's the most remarkable thing you've ever seen. And certainly, when we're leaving our body at the end of life, and we're not identified with the body anymore, it's much easier to rest in that light, potentially. But right now, in this very neutral moment where we're hanging out on a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon or Saturday evening, wherever you are in the world, that light is here. It's not always a Technicolor, IMAX, whatever the thing is, Dolby sound. It's just, here we are. It's this moment with all of the fear, guilt, shame, and grief. Okay, so we've talked about how fear is the enemy of the first chakra. It makes it hard to be grounded. Guilt and shame, guilt about what we do, shame about who we are, the enemies of the second and third chakra. The personal chakras, the fourth chakra, the enemy is grief, because we've loved and we've lost, so we tend to armor our hearts. Grief, then the fourth chakra is the bridge into the transpersonal chakras, 5, 6, and 7, Tantra and non-duality. But it is these first 4 chakras, the fear, guilt, shame, and grief, that make it difficult to rest in these neutral states. Because if you're just resting there, you're going to be feeling your fear, guilt, shame, and grief. By being able to just be in the moment, we're giving up wishing for things to be better. We're saying, okay, here I am. I'm feeling this right now, and I can be with this. Beyond that, as the heart begins to open, we can be in these neutral moments as a way of practicing for all beings, not just for ourselves. And finally, in Vajrayana, finally in Tantra, we're giving up our identity as somebody that is not divine. learning to be with these simple moments can be the gateway in a very direct, unfabricated path to this boundless spaciousness. In the beginning of practice, we're mindful of content. Oh, my mind is thinking, I'm ungrounded, I'm uncentered. But if we can really be in those neutral moments enough, we can be with them as a portal. It's a different kind of awareness. We're looking at it as we're looking through the experience into presence, into non-duality. So that's just driving on the bridge over to Berkeley, and the sun is shining or the sun is not shining. And there's the flow of traffic, and am I being followed by the cop, and what's going on, and am I going to be on time, and all those things, or am I just driving over the bridge, and there it is. In a way, what we're talking about here is motivation. Are you motivated enough that you're willing to pay attention during these neutral moments, or do you have to wait till you're in front of your puja table or until things are difficult? Are we on autopilot when we're driving, when we're walking around, when we're preparing food? Most of us are a lot of the time. And to the extent we are, it's going to be really difficult to be there in the challenging times. As Suzuki Roshi said, the most important thing is finding the most important thing. If you are motivated, if you know what the most important thing is, then yes, you have fear, guilt, shame, and grief. Yes, those things are part of the human experience. But we're motivated enough to be present in these moments that aren't beating us on the chest and saying, pay attention now because this is so difficult or this is so wonderful. What does it feel like in your body, in your mind, in your heart when you're asleep? There's a kind of a deadness. There's a disconnection. It's not horrible, but it's not really being fully awake. I once was at a very long, intense meditation retreat, and coming home, my friends and I stopped at a Howard Johnson's restaurant in Western Massachusetts, and we went into the Howard Johnson's. And I had this surreal experience that it felt like I was in a zombie movie, that everybody in the restaurant was the Walking Dead, right? That like nobody was there. They were just it's all conditioned response. That if you had a big enough computer, you could say, that guy's a Cobb salad, over there is the soup of the day. And it was like, and I'm not saying that in any judgmental way. I was not looking down on people, but it was this very sad, actually, that we accept this deadness. It takes work. It takes work to keep coming back again and again. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Doesn't mean you have to meditate more. Certainly, meditating will help you to be there for those neutral experiences. It doesn't mean that you have to go into psychotherapy, but the better handle you have on your fear, guilt, shame, and grief, the easier it is going to be there in those neutral states. But this is a practice that anybody can do all the time. How alive do you want to be? Feeling the longing. So right now, as we bring this spiritual pep talk to a close, what's going on in the mind? When you watch the mind, it tends to calm down. What's going on in the heart level of the heart mind? Do you feel connected? Do you feel embodied? Okay. So it's taken me a very long time to come to this. I've gone to so many long retreats. I've gone to so many teachers. I've traveled around the world and have been seeking intense peak experience and seeking all kinds of healing modalities, somatic, psychological, psychotherapeutic, all kinds of body-based, this, that, so many things. And I'm just beginning to come to this point that it's then these intermediate transition stages that, like in Tibetan Buddhism, we talk about bardos between life and death, or major bardos, but these kind of minor bardos, if we can call them that, of where we really tend to take time out and say, this is not a time to practice. And if you can be awake from getting up, putting your clothes on, walking downstairs, having your cup of coffee or tea, walking to your car and driving somewhere, then if you get in an automobile accident on the way, there's a much, much better chance you're going to say Ram, Ram, Ram than what the hell is this going on right now? Thank you very much. Questions or responses, remarks, comments, anything? Kurt.
Yeah, hi, Dale. Thank you so much for this topic. It's very relevant for me right now. I just came out of a beautiful 10-day retreat at Spirit Rock. And I sat a bit with the neutral that came up a lot. And something I realized was there's also, or at least what I experienced, was a certain dryness to just being in the presence with the sensations arising. And it almost felt a bit like that dryness of that practice felt kind of dull. And I think what came up with my thoughts is like, oh, is this really how I want to be in the world? But I don't know, kind of curious to see if there's an element of dryness to this practice. I also felt like metta practice, love, almost was much juicier. So I kind of wanted to swim in that more. But anyway, curious to get your thoughts around this dryness versus the juiciness of, I don't know, like a metta practice.
Right. One of my teachers said that we often mistake excitement for happiness, that people in the West are kind of attached to being excited, things happening. And that can be emotional, it can be physical. It's what you're asking is a very individual question in the sense that we're all on our own path, and at some point for almost everybody, there is a time when it's going to be dry, when we're just really working with the mind, we're just really learning to be with things the way they are. And I have been humbled by noticing how my and almost everybody's understanding of love and compassion is often very limited. That we think of love and compassion as kind of juicy, having an emotional quality to it. There's a wonderful Vipassana teacher. She's dead now, I'm almost sure. Deepa Ma, a very, very evolved practitioner and teacher of mindfulness meditation in India, who said that her practice had evolved to a place where there was no distinction between mindfulness and love. That if she were mindful enough, of course, of something, of course she would love it. And if she loved something, of course she would be mindful of it. but most of us aren't at that point yet. So that we have to possibly go back and forth between cultivating mindfulness and cultivating loving kindness, cultivating compassion. And what kind of retreat did you do at Spirit Rock? Was it a Vipassana retreat?
Yeah, it was an inside retreat, Vipassana retreat.
Okay. Well, so that as I've done a lot of Zen retreats, a lot of Vipassana retreats, and to me, they were necessary to go into something that did seem kind of dry at times, to purify, to be with places in me that I had been avoiding or denying all of my life, that allowed me then to begin to trust the vulnerability of the open heart. Right? I mean, if we really look at these chakras, fear, guilt, shame, grief, that when you sit there and do mindfulness practice, you're going to be aware of, in sometimes very subtle forms, a lot of fear, guilt, shame, and grief. And I remember once I had this fantastic meditation right over there at my altar, 3 feet away. And my mind had been really still for quite a while. And a thought came bubbling up. And I judged it and said, Dale, get rid of that thought. You're not doing a good enough meditation right now. Right? And it was not a loud voice like that. It was a very quiet, subtle voice. But there was a rejection of part of myself. Right? And by being able to be aware of that thought and realize that that was just conditioning, that it was not the voice of truth. It was just another thought, that I could be aware of that. I could let go of that. And it opened my heart a little bit more. Okay, so certainly after retreat, if you want, you can do some loving kindness practice. You can be aware of, right now, do you feel connected to me, to you, to us, to dharma, to God, to whatever? But doing that, and I have been around some Vipassana teachers that were supposedly enlightened people who had a very dry persona. And I thought, I don't want to be enlightened like that. I want to be enlightened in another way, right? I have my main practice now is devotional. Maybe you have a devotional component to your being that needs to be cultivated more than straight Vipassana courses is eventually going to do. But certainly going into them as deeply as you can is incredibly useful, because it prepares the foundation for opening the heart. In some traditions, they say the belly, second and third chakra, the upper belly, lower belly, support the open heart. And there are a lot of people who have the opposite experience you're talking about. They do a lot of Krishnadas Jayutal retreats. They sing, they open their heart, but they don't have the mindfulness foundation. And the devotion is unstable. For many of us, and the tricky thing is that you have to decide, you, Kurt, you don't have a teacher saying, now do devotional practices, now do mindfulness practices, now become a vegetarian, now get divorced, now go to India. You've got to make those decisions. And sometimes the part of you that's making the decision is the scared part or the judgmental part. So it's trial and error. It's the Braille method. Good luck.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just one thing I wanted to share that resonated is, actually, coming out of the retreat, I was very surprised because I've been dealing with a lot of, frankly, depression and grief, which is very new for me. But it almost resonates what you said around, through deeper mindfulness, potentially the stuff that I've buried is emerging to the surface.
Yeah.
So anyway, I appreciate you
Thank you.
I've been at Vipassana retreats, particularly Goenka retreats, where the guy in front of me had a full-blown seizure just from meditating. So that, I mean, in one way, we could think of mindfulness as being kind of dry, but at the same time, if you're really paying attention, it is a very heartfelt. I mean, as I said before, in Sanskrit and in Chinese, there's only one word for heart-mind. In a way, the heart is the depth of the mind is the surface of the heart. So if you're really, really, really mindful, the heart is going to eventually, and that's the operative word there, eventually going to reveal itself. It takes patience. Good luck with all of that. And thank you for a great question. John.
Good morning. This strikes me as kind of like a beginner's question.
Good.
As it may. I have, God, for years and years actually, have had a hard time with, I don't know, what would I call it, like dual mind, perhaps? It's like how to be fully present with what you want to be present with. And especially, for instance, if I'm dealing with a person and I'm really like deep in conversation with them or really being there for them, whatever. It's like how to do that and be present with the overall, be present with me and everything else that's going on around. It seems like if I'm doing some of that, then I'm diluting the first. I'm diluting being present with the person. Yeah, so if you would comment on that, please.
So when you're saying you're not being with the person, what are you doing? What's the other part?
If I'm being with the person, and then at the same time, I'm attempting to take the half step back, as it were, and be present with everything, like be present of me as well as that person, be present with whatever's going on around. So it's how to do both at the same time.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. And I have this kind of teaching device that I talk about where there's a knob on the side of your head. Yeah. It's like a tuning knob that goes from 0 to 100. And if it's at 0, none of your attention's inside. It's all outside. And if it's 100, it's all outside. None of it's inside. And generally that knob is at an unconscious setting. And one part of practice here is learning to control the knob so that you can put it at 75-25 or 25-75. And to me, though, it's not two minds, it's one mind. It's not like I'm doing two different things. It's where I'm focusing attention. And I get what you're saying. You can focus it out there or in here. But I guess what my experience has been as practice has evolved is that if I'm mindful and grounded and centered, and my heart is open, and I'm just paying attention to that, then I'm very in tune with what's going on in the room. I'm connected to the person there. Whereas if I'm trying to pay attention to that person and losing track of what's going on in myself, then I often lose connection with that person. And in fact, when I'm at these training workshops where people are learning to be guides for the dying, I say something that's a little surprising to people sometimes, is that caregiving is work on yourself. It's only secondarily about helping the other person. That it's really learning to meditate when somebody's asking you for help. right? And we could expand that here to say you're in a conversation with somebody, and it's learning to meditate when you're talking to somebody. Can right now, when I'm talking to you, can I be grounded and centered? Can I be mindful of what's going on in my body? Can I feel what's going on in my heart? Can that not be such that I'm not I'm not so lost in my mind trying to figure out what to say to you, but there's a certain faith, a certain trust in the Dharma, in myself with a capital S, in Maharaji coming through me, that I'm not worried about what the hell I'm going to say to John McNally. Right? I'm being in myself. I'm just being completely open and letting the stuff come out. And it lands the way it lands, and then you respond, and I'm really being present with all of that. So that there's not two things. There's us. It's not me versus you. It's this is one global experience happening. And that takes practice, because we feel guilty. We feel ashamed. I mean, how many times am I in a counseling conversation with somebody and they're apologizing for things they don't need to apologize for? So that people's shame, people's guilt, people's grief are showing up in ways that make it difficult to be in that wholeness. But there is a state that we can practice in these more neutral moments, like driving or preparing food or taking a shower, that you can then bring into a conversation with somebody, so that it's not two, it's just one. There aren't two, and the heart and mind aren't two, and the body and the mind aren't two fundamentally either, when we get right down to it. But that takes a profound trust to die into that, to die into love. The Ram Dass folks, the Love, Serve, Remember Foundation, is having a workshop in Maui that I'm going to be teaching at in December. It's called Dying into Love, which is really what we're talking about here. Can you die into love? Can that conversation with Kurt, can you be so present that there's no distinction between being mindful and being loving? Because it's just... Here's a very short poem by Hafiz. He said, "In the eyes of your beloved, everything you ever do, think, or say is always, always beautiful." Right? So we're busy saying, I've got to fix myself. I've got to improve myself. I've got to try harder. What about surrendering into trust in who we are?